Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're making a quick stop back at the Red Ridge Range in Clark County before we continue on and update another one of our parks. The main reason for the return trip is pretty simple. While we gave much of this park a refresh previously, the aviaries were one area that never really got that attention they deserved. Today we're finally going to change that. This update is going to be a little different from some of the others we've done. The aviaries themselves are already in place, so instead of building from scratch, we'll be stepping inside them to rework the layouts, rearrange the animals, and take advantage of some of the new aviary features the game has introduced. So with that said, let's jump in and get reacquainted with the skies of Red Ridge Range as we update these aviaries here in Jurassic World Evolution 3. Before we get into the animal, the first thing we're going to work on is the Hyperloop tunnel running through the aviary. I do want to give credit to the person who originally built this because this wasn't my design. If you somehow see this video, just know this is genuinely one of my favorite Hyperloop builds I've seen in the game. And with that, I'm going to be changing it a few times through this video. Since I already have the tunnel lined up, I'm going to be extending it so we can really sell the idea that guests are walking straight through the aviary as they enter the rest of the park. And seeing this got me thinking about one of the biggest changes from the recent update, the terrain. Before the update, aviaries always felt a little flat in every sense of the word. They could still look alright, but everything existed in a very similar level, and it was harder to make this feel like a real environment for pterosaurs. Now we can actually start playing with the environment and the elevation, and for animals that fly, that feels like a huge difference. I'm glad I waited for this update. Not that I knew it was coming, because I'm not that cool, but if you are building aviaries in Jurassic World Evolution 3, I think the terrain tools are one of the biggest improvements we've got. Flying pterosaurs should feel three-dimensional, and while it isn't perfect, this gives us a lot more flexibility to create believable habitats. For this aviary, we're going with the Kyujara, the Tapejara, and the Dimorphodon. I think these three really work well together because, especially for an entrance exhibit, they all handle large groups well. So we can really create a busy, active aviary without it feeling overcrowded. I feel like the Kyujara are going to be the foundation of this enclosure. They were really likely social animals, so having a large group of them flying around immediately gives the aviary that sense of life and movement. And then we have the Tapejara, which are easily some of my favorite pterosaurs in the game. Any animal with a massive head crest generally is going to be in my favorites, and I feel like they add a completely different look compared to some of the other animals, like the Dimorphodon. These guys are basically chaos with wings. They're small, they're stockier, and they have such a unique design compared to the other two species that I feel like they add a little bit of personality that makes this enclosure work and feel more interesting. From a distance, it's sometimes hard for me to tell the difference between a Tapejara and a Kyujara, but I can spot a Dimorphodon pretty well. Obviously in Jurassic World Evolution 3, I can't control exactly where each animal goes or how they use the space, but my goal is to build an environment that feels like it could support different behaviors. Maybe one of them is filling the open airspace, maybe one is using the higher areas around the cliffs, and maybe the Dimorphodon's flying closer to the guests. Only thing I can guarantee is that Dimorphodons need multiple nests next to each other to be happy, so we'll need to be sure we have at least two of them near each other. You don't really need to have that third one, it's just a nice to have, but a little unnecessary in my personal opinion. Because all these animals will start to populate this area really fast, it's important that we're giving plenty of extra space to start because if we aren't careful, this aviary is going to get tight quickly. Now you might have noticed one animal is missing from this aviary compared to previous versions of the Red Ridge Range. The Quetzalcoatlus is gone. The Quetzalcoatlus deserves to be the star of its own enclosure, which means it has been removed from the park and we're on the lookout for a new home. Right now, I'm deciding between placing it either in the Sichuan Basin or the Hawaii maps. Not sure yet, but I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know down in the comments where you think the Quetzalcoatlus belongs. And if you want to see where it eventually ends up, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel because we'll be bringing it back in a future update. So moving on to the second aviary, this one originally started with the idea of housing both the Tropeognathus and Sierradactylus together. But the more I looked into their needs and how I wanted the enclosure to feel, the more I realized those two species just weren't going to create the type of cohesive habitat I was looking for. It's part of the journey when you don't have a full planned build when you start, so instead of focusing on two animals together that need different environments, we're going to focus this aviary just around the Tropeognathus. Now, one thing that was already here and isn't changing is the remote viewing gallery. Realistically, this would be a pretty permanent structure, so rather than trying to move it, we're just going to build around it and make it feel like it belongs in the habitat. This aviary is also where I really wanted to experiment more with the new terrain tools. The goal is to create a multi-level environment with a waterfall that runs through the enclosure. That gives the Tropeognathus a natural water source, but it also helps break the space up and create different levels where we can place nests and viewing areas. To really bring this to life, we'll be using a healthy bit of terrain brush, but the rocks that we have available to us are going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. I want to eliminate much of the smooth terrain cliff sides here, especially around the waterfall, to help this feel a little more realistic. So what do we know about Tropeognathus? The name Tropeognathus actually means keel jaw, which comes from the distinctive ridges along its upper and lower jaw. Like many pterosaurs, it had a unique look where you immediately know what you're looking at when you see it, or you at least know that it's not a pteranodon. One thing I really like about Tropeognathus is that it feels like a good middle ground for a pterosaur exhibit. It was a larger pterosaur, but it doesn't have the same overwhelming presence as the Quetzalcoatlus or the Thanatos Draken, and it feels like it could be a centerpiece, but it doesn't have to. It just is in here because, again, it didn't make sense to have the Ceardactylus in the same enclosure here that we were building. Based on where the fossils were found, Tropeognathus was likely a coastal animal that spent a lot of time around waterways and most likely fed on fish. We don't have a traditional coast in this enclosure. We're actually on a cliffside here with waterfalls that come out the side of this aviary here. And this is where some of that creative liberty is going to have to come into play. Obviously, this is still Jurassic World Evolution 3, so we're not trying to perfectly recreate prehistoric coastlines here. But I do love when the design choices can connect back to the animal themselves. This one is definitely taking a lot more creative liberty, but the idea of a large pterosaur habitat built around water is close enough-ish. The other thing that I like really about adding the waterfall here is just how much I feel like it changes the overall shape of the enclosure. Before, it was basically just a large open space, but by adding the elevation and the water and these different levels, it gives the aviary a lot more depth, and the waterfall becomes almost the centerpiece of this habitat with the nests and the perches that we'll build around it, just really elevating and adding to this space here. And having the ability to have all of these different building tools and using things like we'll have some fences here that maybe those wouldn't make sense like in a real waterfall in the Cretaceous, but it does create a space where like if our staff or anyone got up there, they'd be able to like safely go into these spaces, and I don't need someone accidentally falling down multiple levels of a waterfall here. We did get to play a lot more with the perches here as well, and so did a little bit with the logs and blending it into there. I had some trouble figuring out what the color was going to be to blend it with the rocks, but I was able to also add these into our boathouse that we have in this space, and blending those just right under the wood made it, I feel like, a really nice addition to that second aviary. So for the final aviary here in the Red Ridge Range, I wanted to try to bring it all together and create something that felt a little more focused on the connection between the guests and the animals. So first thing we're going to add here is this extended deck coming off of the viewing gallery. The idea here is that this would be a space where the animal care teams would come out to do their daily checks. They can inspect the fish supply, they can monitor the animal from a closer distance, or just have a better vantage point of what's happening throughout at least the entrance of this enclosure. Obviously, the guests would not have access to this area, but I love adding little details like this because I feel like it makes the park, again, a little bit more realistic. This isn't just an exhibit. We need to get closer to these animals to really monitor things and feel like they're happy and they're thriving in some of these spaces here. And we've got some pretty high-profile pterosaurs in this space here. So for this aviary, we're going to have the Pteranodon, the Geostenbergia, and then the Thanatos Draken. Starting with Pteranodon, this is probably the pterosaur most people recognize first. It's the one that most people are likely the most familiar with. I think it's the most famous flying animal ever. It's got its massive wings, its long crest, its association with Jurassic Park. There's a lot of things going for it that make it feel like, while these obviously aren't dinosaurs, it's one of the more famous animals in this period here in the late Cretaceous. And they're exactly the kind of animal you'd expect when you walk through a aviary or a pterosaur focused park, which Clark County was intended to be. So another reason we might strategically place them near the back of the park. So you got to work your way to get to one of these. Then we have the Geosternbergia. Like Pteranodon, it looks very similar. It is another large crested pterosaur, but the difference between them and what makes it the combination with this and the Pteranodon interesting is just the unique head shape and the crest that it has. The silhouette, can't use words today, but both of these feel like they look very similar, but there are small distinct differences that you should be able to tell the difference from them, even from a further distance, different from the Cayujara and the Tapejara. But the last one we have in here, again, is going to be that Thanatos Draken, and this is going to be the heavyweight that brings in a lot more people here. Thanatos Draken is one of the largest pterosaurs in the game, and it brings that same sense of scale that made the Quetzalcoatlus an impressive animal. And even though, again, we're not going to have Quetzalcoatlus here, we got to find a new home for it, Thanatos Draken should have a similar pull. The difference is that this aviary is designed to be around large open habitat space here where an animal like Thanatos Draken can really appreciate it, and I feel like it helps that Pteranodons like Thanatos Draken. I think this combination works here because each of these species fills a slightly different role. Pteranodon is the classic pterosaur. The Geosternbergia just adds a unique and recognizable species variant, and then the Thanatos Draken is going to give that massive centerpiece that makes this feel special and unique and one that you'd want to get to at the end of this. After updating all three of these aviaries at Red Ridge Range, I think it's a great example of how much the new aviary tools have changed in these exhibits. I'm not going to get into the fact that I'm a little bit upset and disappointed that we can't use the open air aviaries in the campaign playthrough. I don't have a great reason why. I haven't finished the campaign playthrough. I still need to get into that more. I've been delayed with some other things, which is why I haven't posted more about that, but we'll get to that shortly here. Regardless, I would like to see the open air aviaries in the classic campaign. But maybe that'll be something that gets updated later if I complain enough. Probably not, but I'm going to keep trying. But again, I feel like these aviary updates were really great to see and to update in here. So with that, I feel like we can leave the Red Ridge Range, and I feel like we've left it a little bit better than we found it. So thanks again for watching as we experiment with these new aviary tools. If you have tips to make these even better, let me know in the comments. We're off to the Sichuan Basin next to update that park, but until then, enjoy your day. Enjoy the game, and I will see you on the next build.